There's nothing like an American election, I have to say, and a man who knows a thing or two about them. And what better way to start the show? Mr. Piers Morgan, live from New York. Piers, very good morning to you.
Mike, how are you?
Yeah, very well, very excited. I mean, there's not a lot we can talk about at the moment because we don't know very much, right? But at the end of the day, this is a massive election for the whole world. It's not just about America, is it? It's about the rest of us as well.
Yeah, look, it's huge. It's the old thing that when America sneezes, we all get a cold. You know, it's the biggest superpower in the world, certainly has the biggest military in the world. And I think that what happens there is incredibly consequential. And you couldn't imagine two more different candidates than Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. One is a progressive left-wing politician, and one is this bulldozer conservative who just treats politics like he did business, as a ruthless game to be won.
And you've got a great and interesting relationship with Donald Trump. Sometimes he talks to you, sometimes he ignores you, but you're always in touch with him. Have you spoken to him recently? How's his mood?
Yeah, I texted him last Sunday before the infamous, or now infamous, rally at Madison Square Garden. I just got to New York and I was going to go down there and see my first ever Trump rally. It was quite an experience. Yeah. And I texted him to say, I'm going to go down and could I come and say hello? And he called me 20 seconds after the text arrived. And we had this hilarious conversation about Madison Square Garden, the fact that Muhammad Ali had fought there, Marilyn Monroe sang happy birthday to JFK there, the Pope had been there, and now Donald Trump was headlining. And I think that tickled his egotistical fancy. But he was on very good form, very confident about the election. Obviously, as we all know, he still believes he didn't lose the last one, but he did, and I've told that to him to his face. And this time, whatever happens, I just hope there is a peaceful transfer of power, whoever wins.
Yeah, well, he said, hasn't he, that he will accept the result as long as it's fair. And it already leaves a bit of a sort of a room for manoeuvre there. And he's already started, hasn't he, with his little tricks where he's saying tonight, you know, I'm hearing that there's been cheating going on in Philadelphia. You know, I haven't really got any more information than that. This is what he does. He kind of just disrupts a bit, doesn't he?
Look, he doesn't like losing. Donald Trump is a very bad loser, and so I don't expect him to accept anything. I expect him to claim victory way before he's supposed to, even if he doesn't end up winning. But my gut feeling, Mike, is I think Trump is going to win, and if he does, it'll come down to the fact that there are two big issues in America right now which dominate all the polls. When you ask Americans what they really care about, it's the cost of living crisis and it's the immigration crisis on the southern border, both of which have been a pretty big disaster under the Democrats for the last 4 years. And Kamala Harris hasn't even tried to chuck Joe Biden under the bus, as many might do in her position. She said, look, I wouldn't do anything differently. Well, you know, nearly 10 million people have come in illegally on that southern border in 4 years. She was the border czar. So we think we have problems with this in the UK. It's nothing compared to what's happened in America. And I think that she will get punished in the ballot box for that failure. And then when it comes to cost of living, inflation is still raging in America. It may have come down from its high, but as you know, the definition of inflation is it's just prices going up. Until that is 0% inflation, the prices continue to go up and up and up. And the number of people who said to me, when I go to the grocery store and get a small bag of groceries and it's $60, $70, that is how I think many people may vote. So if Trump wins, it'll be those two things.
And we're hearing that there's quite a big turnout of young men in certain parts of the country, which is also good news for him. A lot of younger women voting for her. You know, it's a big turnout by the looks of it. So when are you expecting to see the first kind of signs of some kind of indication as to what is going to happen through the course of the night?
I think the early signs out of Georgia are very interesting. Looks like Trump is doing well there. If Trump wins Georgia early, that's a real marker in the sand that he might be on for a big win. Remember, Mike, that the polls, they're so close, both nationally and in the key 7 swing states, that any results possible. You could have a narrow Trump or Harris win. You could also have a landslide Trump or Harris win. Doesn't take a lot for all of those swing states to move one way or the other. If Trump was to win Georgia early on, look at Virginia too. Then you look at some of the other ones that come in and you think the big one's Pennsylvania. If he can win Pennsylvania, it's all over. And it looks, you know, early, at the moment they're saying a toss-up. Well, most of those swing states look like a toss-up. But my gut feeling from talking to a lot of Americans is I think a lot of them are going to hold their nose, even if they don't like Trump, and they're going to vote Trump, and he will ultimately win.
And in terms of what happens then, a lot of friends of mine in America have said, you know, it's going to be carnage, really, no matter who wins. You know, they've been boarding up Washington, D.C. all day today, just in case there's some kind of, you know, violent outbreak of disorder, depending on whether they're from the left or whether they're from the right. What are you seeing and hearing on the ground there in New York in terms of what Americans are feeling like? Because we saw a CNN poll which said a large number of Americans are now dissatisfied with their government and not happy, and quite a lot of them are angry.
Yeah, well, they are angry, and that's why I think Trump will win. But I was at, as I say, the Madison Square Garden rally, and what was really interesting to me was they were expecting thousands of protesters. 150 turned up. Now, if you remember back in 2016, there were hundreds of thousands of people rampaging around the streets of New York and DC in protest at Trump. This time it was non-existent, even when he did a rally at the absolute epicenter of Manhattan culture, the Madison Square Garden. And that said to me that for all the talk on the left about Trump being the new Hitler, a fascist dictator, and so on, when push comes to shove, they don't have the rage in their bones that they had 8 years ago. And the reason for that is pretty obvious. We've seen him in action for 4 years. And other than the ridiculous way that he left by refusing to accept the result and, you know, certainly contributing at best, and you could say a lot worse than contributing to what happened in the Capitol January 6th riots. You know, ultimately, Trump, for most of his tenure, was a pretty moderate Republican president. You know, take away the rhetoric and the tweeting and the offensive stuff that comes out of his mouth, actually judge him on what he did, and he wasn't that controversial.
Yeah, and the world actually was a much safer place, it seems to me. In terms of him as an individual, do you think he's mellowed at all in the time that you've known him?
No. I think it'd be a bit like saying if you and me mellowed. No, I think the same old Donald Trump. Look, people don't change when they get to 78 years old. The strange thing about Trump, he's never had a drink. So you and he could not be more different. He's never had a drug. He's never smoked a cigarette. You know, he's 78 without having done any of these things, and it makes him remarkably energetic for a guy who's approaching 80. I call him the Mick Jagger of politics, because he is. He does 2-hour shows at these rallies, as he puts it, pounding out his greatest hits to big crowds. He's like a rock star, which, given his age, is pretty extraordinary. So I think Trump has a lot going for him in terms of his strength of character, his energy, his resilience. We saw when he got shot how he responded. And I do think that the demonization of Trump by his critics and opponents on the left, they just overdo it. You know, the best line I remember was after he won in 2016, I went to the New York Knicks basketball, and I found myself with my son next to Chris Rock, the comedian who was there. And I said, "Why do you think you won?" He went, "I'll tell you why he won. If someone's murdered 8 people, don't go around saying he's murdered 9 all the time." And what he meant was, not that Trump had murdered anybody, but that you shouldn't exaggerate when you don't need to.
Yeah.
You have plenty of things to criticize Trump about without over-rigging the critical souffle.
And is it bad news for Britain in terms of Keir Starmer and David Lammy and some of the things that have been said about Trump if he is the 47th president? Because how does that affect relations with the UK?
I think that somebody will probably be reminding Donald Trump, if he wins, exactly what the British Foreign Secretary has said about him for a number of years, because Lammy didn't hold back. No. And I remember thinking at the time, this is great for your clicks on social media, but what are you going to do if you end up as Foreign Secretary and Trump as president? Well, we may be heading to that, for him, an abyss quite quickly. And I think the problem for Keir Starmer as well is that you just don't see them being natural, easy bedfellows. Right. So I think it'll be good, actually, for one of your upcoming guest, Nigel Farage, I suspect. It's probably better for him than anybody else.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing for Nigel Farage. He'll be the closest man in Britain to the President of the United States, if that turns out to be the case.
Hang on. Second closest.
Second closest, sorry. Piers, I completely forgot. My apologies. Many thanks for spending time with us. Thank you very much indeed. We'll talk to you, I'm sure, in the coming days. Piers Morgan, host of Piers Morgan Uncensored, of course, live from New York.